Stretching as we know it is fundamentally flawed. For the most part, when we think stretching, it's about sitting at end ranges of motion until things feel loose. Although this may offer temporary feel-good sensations, it doesn't adequately prepare the body for exercise. So in today's video, I'm going to go over 5 different techniques on how to properly stretch your body before exercise, as well as teach you why the current way of doing things doesn't cut it. So before any type of exercise, I always like to start with some type of breathing. The technique that we're going to start with is kneeling breathing. Now I've gone over breathing quite extensively in another video, so I will leave that right up here or here and you can check that out. But we are really going to try to apply the expansive state of breathing in this position. So what we're going to do here is come into a kneeling position. You're going to place your hands on top of your knees, and all you're going to start with is just breathing expansively in a 360-degree fashion. For now, what you can think about is trying to expand or create as much space both through the upper body, but also through the abdominal wall as well. And really what we're trying to do here is just get a feel for kind of what our body feels like today. How's it responding to the different pressure that I'm putting into it? What happens if I breathe into a certain area, and how does my body respond to that? I more or less use this as a way to kind of bring myself into my body, as a lot of people, myself included, tend to operate a lot from my head, and I can be very heady about things, I suppose. So I find that just by starting with breathing, it kind of forces me to come into my body and bring a little bit more presence to the workout ahead. The next exercise we're going to get into is going to be arm swings. So what we are going to be doing here is using our principles around ground tension, as we do for many exercises. And we are simply going to start with taking one arm into an external rotation, another arm into an internal rotation, and we are just going to start by swinging our arms across our body kind of in a semicircle pattern, and we're just going to allow the upper body to kind of slowly rotate alongside that. So what I'm doing here is taking kind of the presence of the breath that I was utilizing in the first exercise, and I'm trying to carry that over into this one as well. What I'm trying to do is create that space with my breath, see what it feels like if I rotate with it, if I maintain some of it, if I let some of it go. And again, this is all in an attempt to try to bring us a little bit more present and deeper into our body in that moment. Once you get kind of the baseline of coordination here, you can definitely start to increase the momentum a little bit. And ideally, we're starting to generate a little bit of a rhythm as we go side to side. So as I let my body rotate out one way, I'm thinking about the tension that's kind of involved to recoil myself back the opposite way. What I find is the more that I can bring my presence of mind into kind of that recoil effect, alongside the breathing that I was working on previously, the better this exercise and the following ones are going to be. For our third exercise, we are going to be working a step back lunge. So what I'm going to do is start just with both feet beside one another and just get used to the lunge initially. Just get used to stepping back, loading some weight onto that back leg, and then just bringing both feet essentially back together. What this is doing is getting us used to a weight transfer between the feet, but it's also creating some single leg stability as we work that step back and simultaneously lunge down into it. What I like to start to incorporate here is a little bit of a overhead pressing motion. So now at the same time that I'm stepping back with the leg, I'm simultaneously going to press the opposite arm above my head. What this is doing is it's starting to dynamically stretch the muscles kind of between my quads, my hip, and then all the way up to my armpit. And this is all happening in one shot. I'm not just having to hold my arm above my head to get a little bit of a lat stretch, or just hang out in a hip flexor stretch as an example. Ideally, when we go through a movement such as this, it should be stretching. The difference is this is a more ballistic or active stretch, and not just one that is passive where we hang out at end ranges of motion. So as you can see, as I'm pressing my arm up, I am slowly rotating it in, And then as I meet my leg back in the middle, it's just rotating back almost into a bicep curl position. Once I kind of reload things back into the bicep curl, I'm just gonna try to use some of that momentum that I created there to step back with and then rotate the arm off of. I would suggest starting off somewhat slow with this exercise, and then you can start to build up the tempo and the pace as you go through and work through anywhere between about 12 to 15 repetitions per leg. The fourth exercise we're gonna get into is going to be the side lunge. What we can start with here is simply just taking a side step and then just bouncing back to our midline. And what you can prioritize here is when you go into that side step is just keeping the hips slightly shifted back. You're gonna be watchful that the knee doesn't excessively shift too far forward when you go into that side step. If you're connecting this exercise well, you should feel your quads, but also things such as the hamstrings and glutes connect to that motion. And then that is what you're gonna utilize to kind of load and then push off of to bring you back to your center line. We can start to build on this one as well, where we start to go through just a slight cross with the upper body, and we can work subtle T-spine rotation alongside this, where I just kind of rotate over my lead leg, then I'm gonna bounce back to the center line, and then I'll rotate a little bit back over my standing leg. And really, I'm just working opposite crosses here. So if I'm gonna be taking a side step out to my left, my right arm is gonna come across my body. I'll try to create a little bit of length, we'll say through my right side. And then as I bounce back to my midline, my left arm is gonna be coming across, in which case I will get some length through my left side. For our fifth and final technique, we are going to work some side to side steps. So really what we are gonna do here is take principles from our reverse lunge, as well as our side lunge, and we're just gonna combine them together. So we're gonna get into a split stance here, and all I'm gonna do is focus initially on dropping my center of gravity into about a half lunge. Once I'm in that half lunge position, I'm gonna try to prioritize pushing the ground away from me as I take a slight hop to the side. Once I take that hop to the side, I'm gonna ideally land back in that half lunge. I'm gonna load the momentum up, and then that is going to spring me back to the other side. Some things to focus on here is when you're going through the side hop is think about absorbing the momentum. Don't think about coming to kind of a full dead weight stop. Think about how the momentum is actually carried throughout this movement. So as you can see, as I'm going through this exercise, I'm kind of loading the momentum into my hamstrings, my glutes, and really into all the tissues in around my pelvis. As I'm generating the momentum on that one side of my pelvis, I'm pushing into the ground to kind of push that force away from me, because ultimately that is what is going to launch me to the other side. Upon landing, I'm just absorbing that momentum, and then the whole cycle repeats itself. So as you can see, when it comes to stretching, especially prior to exercise, I personally would not encourage any type of passive stretching. And the reason for this is if I'm just hanging out at an end range of motion, really what I'm teaching my body is that this one muscle needs to get continuous length while the rest of my body is essentially just shut off from the motion. On the contrary, with what we went through today, it's a lot more dynamic and a lot more integrated. We're teaching the body that when one muscle gets length, other muscles need to simultaneously connect to that movement. And whether you're jumping into a gym routine, you're jumping into a sport, or you're just going through this as a morning exercise routine to get your body prepared, the fundamentals don't really change, because what we deal with in the gym, what we deal with in sport, and on a day-to-day basis is really quite similar. And it's a lot more likely that if I'm going to be picking up a dumbbell at the gym, or if I'm going to be taking a lateral cut in soccer, or even if I'm just going to be picking a pen off the floor at home, that it's more than likely I'm going to have a lot of muscles working and not just one muscle passively getting length at a time. It's important to remember that what you program into the body is ultimately what you are going to get out of it. So be mindful of this fact and try to implement some of these concepts and practices into your own routine. And let me know down below how it went for you. How did you find this type of warm-up or this type of stretching routine? Also, if you have any ideas as to future content that you would like to see out of this channel, leave me a comment below. I'm going to look at every single one of them. I'm going to respond to every single one of them. And as long as it's somewhat reasonable and associated to this channel, I'm certainly going to add it to the list. As always, if you found this video helpful, then something that would help me out greatly is if you throwed it a like. If you want more content like this, as always, you can subscribe. And until next time, make sure you are prioritizing and then you are optimizing for you. I will catch you in the next one. See you next week, guys. Peace.